Okay, so at number 11 we have Doctor Who, Time in the Rani. I don't have the actual DVD with all the special features. This is just part of the Regeneration box set. Um, yeah, it's probably one of the worst Doctor Who stories in its history, in my opinion, from what I've seen. It's probably my least favourite story in my entire collection. It's because it's just a really daft, silly, um, flawless story. It's the debut of Sylvester McCoy, the Seventh Doctor. Uh, I think maybe people would have thought I would have liked the story, as McCoy is my second favourite Doctor. But as it happens, this isn't really one of my favourite stories at all. It's probably my least favourite out of all the ones I own, and but I'd say it's better than a couple of episodes in Series 6, but obviously this is my preference, my opinion, and so yes, that's number 11 with Time and the Rani. Moving on to number 10 now, we have Doctor Who, The Twin Dilemma. Thankfully I have the Target novelisation, as I don't have the DVD. And this features the first episode of Colin Baker, who plays the Sixth Doctor. Obviously, Colin Baker is regarded as the most underrated Doctor because of his aggressive manner, his basic general personality wasn't particularly great and didn't really appeal towards audiences. And this story, although it's a fairly good idea, it's the way it was executed wasn't particularly fantastic. And Eric Saward, say what you will about him, this was probably his worst ever Doctor Who story that he's ever written. Because he's a pretty good writer and doesn't really deserve enough credits, and he's written far more better stories, but unfortunately this is not one of them. And the villain in the story is a bit of a strange creature called Mestor, who I don't really like, and is probably one of my least favourite villains of all time. Moving on to number 9 now, we have Doctor Who, the TV movie, which was released in 1996, which was the year I was born. And I do find the movie enjoyable. And Paul McGann is a nice bloke, and as he's a pretty good Doctor. I've listened to him in like a couple of Big Finish audios, and from what I've heard, he's really, really good. And I hope to hear more of him sometime, because I think there's quite a few people out there who would say he was probably the best Big Finish audio Doctor, but obviously each to their own. I think Grace Holloway is a pretty good one-off companion, despite the fact she's American. I'm not saying anything against Americans. I'm just saying she's slightly different to the usual companion, because they're pretty much all British, apart from Jamie, who was Scottish. Perry, who was American. Well, she was also American, so Grace wasn't the only one. But this was set in San Francisco, and I don't like the Master in this, played by Eric Roberts. He's probably the most underrated Master, because people say John Sim's underrated. I personally like John Sim. I think he's my second favourite Master, because my favourite is Roger Delgado, who is probably still the best in my view. So yeah, at number 9, this is Doctor Who, the movie. Moving on to number 8 now, we have Castrovalva, featuring Peter Davison as the 5th Doctor. Peter Davison isn't really my favourite Doctor. I do find his Doctor slightly, boring-ish. I do like a fair amount of his stories, like I like Warriors of the Deep. I quite like Time Flight. I like The Awakening, and I really like A Shock and the Visitation. Caves of Androzani, of course. But Castrovalva, yeah, it's not really it does have what I what am I trying to say? I think what it does best is handles the concept of post regeneration. I think it does that very, very well. Um, but however, I wouldn't say this was one of my favourite stories, and many other people's favourite stories. But I'm sure there are people out there who love this story if they're fans of the Fifth Doctor. So this will be a good one to get. And if you're a fan of the Fifth Doctor, then this will probably be a good one for you, and as it is his first debut, you may as well go out and buy it. So that's number 8 with Castrovalva. Moving on to number 6 now, we have David Tennant's first story, which was his first appearance, which was the Christmas Invasion. I've sort of realised I might have miscounted my sort of order, because not having obtained a robot, I've sort of forgotten the sort of order, and it's gone a bit messy, but I'll probably post the problem that I had in the description below so you can understand why it was a bit problematic. But now I've sort of realised the problem and it's been solved. So yes, the Christmas Invasion I thought was a really enjoyable episode. I like the cigarettes. I think they're really interesting monsters. I kind of hope they return, really, because they only appeared once in the new series, and I hope they return again, because I think they are actually pretty good monsters, and the costumes are brilliant. And I like the story. It's a very good story. Lots of use of location footage, and I think that's what I like about Series 1 and 2. There's loads of location footage of London. It's really good, and this story especially, I think, sees a lot of location footage, and it really does feel sort of Christmassy, but not the Christmas feel of that the Doctor, the Widow and the Wardrobe gave you, because that was quite frankly just really awful Christmas special, that one. But however, this is far superior to that one, and personally it's one of my favourite Christmas specials. So number 6 we have the Christmas Invasion, so let's move on to number 5. Okay, at number 5 we have Doctor Who Rose. This was the in my top 5 companion debuts. Really good way to start off the new series with the 9th Doctor as Christopher Eccleston. Not Christopher Eccleston as the 9th Doctor. I think he's a really good Doctor. He's my 3rd favourite, and he is also fairly underrated, but of course, in my view, he's one of the best. And he wasn't in it for very long, but Series 1 I thought is one of the best of New Who, personally, and I think Rose is a really good story. Features the return of the Autons, of course. I wouldn't say they were at their best. I think they were better in stories like Spearhead from Space, which you will see later in this video, and again, good use of location footage, and just a really good story overall. Quite a good plot point, and really good introduction to the new series and new era of Doctor Who history. So yeah, that's number 5 with Rose. Let's move on to number 4. So with number 4 we have the first Doctor story, the very first Doctor Who story in many ways, which is An Unearthly Child. Now, of course, I would say that the episodes 2 to 4 aren't very good, but however, the first episode, the pilot episode, is a fantastic episode, and you're in for a treat when you see the pilot episode. But the last 3 sort of let it down a little bit. It's not the best Doctor Who story, although I remember doing a top 10 Doctor Who stories ages and ages ago, back in 2012, saying this is in my top 10, but obviously it's been pushed way back now, and it's definitely not on the list anymore. But it's not to say that it's a bad story, because it's a very decent story, and stories that are a lot worse than this. So, with number 4, this is An Unearthly Child. In third place, we have the Matt Smith debut, The 11th Hour. Now, I think Matt Smith is, because he recently left at Christmas and regenerated into Peter Capaldi, and I think The 11th Hour is really one of Moffat's best episodes. If I had to create a top 10 Stephen Moffat episodes, this will probably be in there, definitely. It's a really good... I've really enjoyed this story when I first watched it. It's really quite funny in some places, and there you eventually see Matt become the Doctor he was meant to be, and features the monsters, the Atraxi, and features also the debut of Series 5, well, the debut of the Matt Smith companion, Amy Pond, who's not really one of my favourite companions, but I thought this was a good story with her. He first sees her as a little girl, and then eventually sees her as like a grown-up woman, and it's a really good story. I mean, I'll recommend it, and I love the pre-title sequence scene where he's flying over London and crash landing into her garden, and that's a bloody good scene. That I love it. So that's number 3 with The 11th Hour. So in second place we have a story of which has not been recovered, but we've got a fair few selection of surviving clips, and this is Patrick Troughton's debut story, Power of the Daleks. I've heard the audio of this, and I've yet to read the book, because I read a bit of it like a fair few months ago, and I never got round to finishing it, so I need to finish it at some point. But the audio is just brilliant. The character Lesterson is such a brilliant character, and this is where the second Doctor is sort of acting a bit of a clown, not so much as Sylvester McCoy when he was in Time in the Ronnie, but I think he was. It's a brilliant story, really good Dalek story as well. Probably the finest, alongside Power of the Daleks, because the two Troughton Dalek stories are excellent. They're very good. One of my favourites, and well, Evil of the Daleks is my favourite story. It's sort of beaten the Aztecs. So let's move on to number 1 with The Final Choice. With John Pertwee being my favourite Doctor, of course, number 1 has to be Spearhead from Space. A fantastic 4-part story. It's so good. It's a very good classic story. I really love the location footage used in this. One of my subscribers, I think, said that some of their locations used to film Spearhead from Space were not far away from his house. I can't remember where exactly they filmed this, but it's I think it was the scene with the cottage that was near his house. It's a really good story. The characters really good. Channing is a pretty good character, and I love the Autons in this. They are probably at their best. And Terror of the Autons, even though the Autons don't feature in it as much, they are still really good in it. But this story is the best Auton story, my favourite Auton story, and it's one of my favourite John Pertwees. I wouldn't say it was in my top 3 Pertwees though, but it's definitely up there in the 10, in the 10s list. So yeah, that's my top 10 Doctor Who debuts. So let's take a look at all of them.